Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Edwards, and I am the account executive for Scholastic Education, servicing Southeast Michigan. That's 29 counties here in Michigan, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our next speaker, Dr. Karen Mapp. She is a senior lecturer on education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and she's also the faculty director of the Education Policy and Management Master's Program. Over the past 20 years, Karen's research and practice focus has been on the cultivation of partnerships among families, community members, and educators that support student achievement and school improvement. She served as the co-coordinator with Professor Mark Warren of the Community Organizing and School Reform Research Project, and as a core faculty member in the Doctorate in Educational Leadership program at HGSE. She is a founding member of the District Leaders Network on Family and Community Engagement. She is a trustee of the Himes Foundation in Boston, Massachusetts, and she's on the board of the Institution for Educational Leadership in Washington, D.C. From 2011 to 2013, Karen served as a consultant on family engagement to the United States Department of Education in the Office of Innovation and Improvement. She currently serves as a consultant to the Family and Community Engagement Division of Scholastic. Karen holds a doctorate and master's of education from Harvard University in administration, planning, and social policy. She also holds a master's in counselor education from Southern Connecticut State University and a bachelor's degree in psychology from Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Karen is the author of numerous publications, including A New Wave of Evidence, The Impact of School, Family, and Community Connections on Student Achievement, and Beyond the Bake Sale, The Essential Guide to Family School Partnerships and Partners in Education, the Dual Capacity Building Framework for Family School Partnerships. So with that, I'd like to bring her on the stage. Everyone, please welcome Dr. Karen Mapp.
Good afternoon. Are we afternoon yet? Yes, we are. So we're running a little behind schedule. Roderick is going to pull up my PowerPoint for me. I'm going to try to do this quickly because I have learned in my career that it's a bad place to be just before lunch. Bad place to be. But we'll see what we can do, move things along. So let me say a couple of things. I have really been impressed by the presentation so far. One of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about here is the importance of strong leadership. And I would suspect that part of the reason why you have seen such an acceleration in Grand Rapids with this particular initiative around attendance is because of the leadership of the district. And that also is going to be very important to what I talk about when I talk about family engagement. So let me get that clicker from you. Thank you so much. I need all the help I can get when it comes to the technical stuff. Okay, so I push this one? All right. Okay, so let's start off first with some definitions. We in the field of family engagement, some of you know my colleagues Joyce Epstein, Ann Henderson, etc. We've been really doing this work now for about 20 years with a lot of passion. This is why I get up every day, is because of this work. What I'm going to do today is to talk to you about what we have learned and what we know about best practice in the area of family engagement. I tell people that I study goodness. I study what works. I know that a lot of researchers study pathology, and I understand that. But I think people like Hetty and I and others are really trying to look at what's working around the country and sharing that with you. So that's what I'm going to do. The first thing I want you to know is we're trying to change the language when we talk about the engagement of our families to family engagement instead of parent involvement. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, when I was deputy superintendent for family engagement in Boston, I heard from some of our adult caretakers because our students are being supported by grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle, foster parents, and the people that we call fictive kin. Those are those aunts and uncles and cousins. When you ask your family how they're related to you, you get a different answer every time, right? Uncle Bubba, right? Auntie Sis. We know that all of those people are very important to our kids, and so sometimes when we say parent, they don't think we're talking about them. I actually had a grandma tell me that she went to a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher asked her when the real parent was going to show up. Okay? So our language has a lot to do with the kind of relationships that we build with our families. So we decided that we were going to try to push the term family. Now, I will still say parent from time to time, but I mean all of the adult caretakers that are surrounding our kids with their support. So when we say family, we mean the adult caretakers. When we say engagement, we really mean any way that our families are really positively supporting their kids. And I'm going to emphasize this anyway because a lot of times, unfortunately, and sometimes unintentionally, we put a box around the kind of engagement that we validate. Sometimes we only validate those families who come in and they're members of our school site councils and our PTAs and our PTOs. But those parents who do a lot of work at home and in the community, a lot of times we don't see them. So we've got to really be open-minded about what we mean about engagement. In fact, I have an institute every summer now on family engagement. It's a graduate-level institute. Anybody can come to it. I'll give you a link to how to find out more information about that at the end of the presentation. One of the gentlemen who was there said to me, you know, Dr. Mapp, I'm really interested in the roots of words. Because sometimes the root of a word tells you its intended meaning. Take a look at the root of the word involvement versus engagement. Involvere means to sort of wrap around, to cover up. That doesn't really connote a partnership, does it? Whereas engagement, we're talking engare, to make a formal agreement, a partnership. So that's another reason why I think using the term engagement really connotes a commitment to one another. And that's what we want. How many of you remember, you're going to date yourself when you raise your hand, so get ready. How many of you remember the Where's the Beef lady with Wendy's? She's back on now. They have a new commercial where they show her, where's the beef? Okay? We remember her. What she wanted to know was, hey, if I'm going to spend my time and my hard-earned resources coming to your establishment, I expect to see something substantive. I don't want to open up that bun and see a hockey puck-sized hamburger. I want to really see something that means something to me. So guess what? Your teachers, your other school staff, your district-level staff, your community members want to know, where's the beef around family engagement? Why should we do this when we have so much on our plates already? Our teachers are overwhelmed with all these different initiatives that we district folks throw down on them every year. Why should this be any different? Why should this be something that we do? These are the results, ladies and gentlemen. You already heard about the importance of family engagement when it comes to attendance. These are some of the other things that we see when our families are engaged. We see that our students with engaged families are the ones that are getting those higher grades and test scores. They're in those advanced placement international baccalaureate programs. They have better attitudes about school. They like school. And as Barrington told us, you know, we have to make school relevant, not just to the kids, but to the parents. because they need to know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then they are really interested in helping us do that. One of my good friends who I'm writing a book with Scholastic, in fact, for teachers about engaging families, her name is Eileen Carver. She's a teacher in Boston. She talks about the fact that she knows those adult caretakers of all of her kids is the only classroom management strategy she needs. Because when those kids know that she knows grandma or grandpa, their behavior is a whole lot different. In fact, she has all of her family's numbers on her cell phone, and they have her phone number too. So she knows, and the kids know that with a click of a dial or a click of a button, she can be in touch with my family member. Makes a huge difference. And you know, kids really love it when they know that the staff knows their family. The kids really like it a lot, even the older ones. They may tell you they don't, but they really do. These are the kids who graduate and go on to higher education. Recent study. I know that in Detroit, I've heard that some schools are doing parent-teacher home visits. We can talk about that a little bit more later. We now have some great research, brand new study just came out, that shows that kids who received a home visit talk about attendance rates, right? Much better attendance, and are reading at or above grade level from a home visit. And the reason is because now the families and the teachers know each other, and they've built a trusting and respectful relationship with one another. One of the things that you're going to hear a theme throughout what I say to you today is the importance of relationships. What else do we know about the impact? So we saw the impact on the kids, but guess what? We now know that there's an impact on the school itself. This is research out of Chicago, the same outfit that Hetty talked about a little while ago, the Chicago Consortium on School Research. Wrote this book in 2010, Organizing Schools for Improvement, Lessons from Chicago. What they did basically was they wanted to find out, hey, we've got a bunch of schools in Chicago that no matter what we do, no matter what intervention we seem to put in place, there's no movement, there's no improvement. But now we've got this other set of schools that seem to be chugging along. What is making the difference? We seem to be giving them the same amount of resources. We seem to be giving them the same programs. Why is it that some schools are able to improve and others can't? What they found out, ladies and gentlemen, is it's actually a formula, like a recipe of a cake, that makes the difference in improving our schools. These are called the 5 essential supports for school improvement. And you know, we in the education sector kind of like to suggest that there's always one easy answer, one silver bullet. Not true. It takes all 5 of these things working together to really get a school to improve. What are those 5 things? I talked about one of them a few minutes ago, strong leadership. Our school leaders are so important. And I'm not just talking about any old kind of leadership, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about what we call distributive leadership. What that means is that that school leader isn't afraid to share something. What is it? Power. Power and responsibility. A lot of people think leadership means that I know everything, that I'm going to come in there and bully people. We're seeing some examples of that in our national scene, right? I'm all that in a bag of chips. I'm the best at everything. Run away from people like that, ladies and gentlemen, because those aren't strong leaders. Leaders build power among their staff, and they share power, and they share power with community and families. So again, it's called distributive leadership. Those are the kinds of leaders that we really see that are able to move the needle when it comes to school improvement. But they can't do it alone. So what are the other 4 ingredients? They've got to have good staff. Professional capacity, and I mean from the custodian on up. Everybody's got to be involved. Everybody, you know how you always see the teams, they all put their hands in, woo. Everybody's got to be in that circle. They also have to get really good instructional guidance, so good professional development. We're learning a lot about what that looks like. There has to be a student-centered learning climate, meaning that everybody is there for the kids. And the question that they always ask is, would this be good for my child? Would this be good for my niece or nephew? Because if the answer is no, then it's not good enough for our kids in the school building. Is the curriculum relevant so that our kids want to do the work? Are they excited? Every time parenting shows that picture of that snake eating that eel, I am all ready to go underneath the table. But the kids are like, wow, look at that. That is so cool. Right? So we've got to make the education student-centered and exciting. But look what else is up there. Parent and community ties. Now that little purple box over in the right-hand upper corner, that's your classroom. That's what we call the instructional core, IC. That triangle represents the student, the teacher, and the content working together. But look at how all of those circles influence what goes on in that classroom. So guess what? What this research has told us, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can't have an improving school without all 5 of these ingredients. If you take one of them out, the entire formula collapses. It's like trying to bake a cake and forgetting the baking powder. It's not going to rise. And in this case, the students will never rise to the levels we want them to. If you take out that parent and community ties, that family and community engagement, no improvement. So the moral of the story for you to take away when you leave here is that you can't improve your schools without your families and your communities. We now have the research to show it. I know too many districts that see family and community engagement as an add-on. Well, Dr. Mapp, once we get teaching and learning nailed down, then we will add in the family engagement. Big mistake. Because as you can see, your family and community engagement impacts your instructional strategies. In fact, family and community engagement is a part of proficient instruction. So I want you to leave here understanding that family engagement is a core part of your whole school reform strategy here in Detroit. And that means that you have to elevate the Office of Family and Student Engagement to be a part of your instructional team. Because in some districts, what I see is the family and community engagement is over here, right? And the superintendent has his or her instructional team, and that person or those people aren't a part of that team. Big mistake. Big mistake. Because they have to know what's happening in terms of instruction, because the family and community engagement is linked to your instruction. What else happens when you have good, strong family engagement in your schools? Your teachers stay in those buildings. Another study about retention. Teachers stay in places where there's strong relationships with families. Not just that your parents show up for the sports events and their families come to the parent-teacher night. This is where there's actually bonds between families and community members. Now we're starting to talk about return on investment. We're talking about economics now, because you spend a lot of money on your teaching corps. And for them to get up and leave after 3 years hurts you deeply when it comes to your budget. You would want your teachers to stay, And so why wouldn't you want them to have strong bonds with the families when you know that that's one of the key ingredients to keeping your staff? There's a lot happening now in the field of family engagement, and I'm really excited about it. You know, there was a time when I was getting really frustrated, and I said, you know, maybe I'll decide to just go ahead and take that bartending class and go with my friend Michelle Brooks, and we're going to go start up a little bar in Barbados. Because this work is wearing me out, and I don't see movement. Well, that's changed. I think with all of the different research studies, we were finally starting to get out there. Now, you know, we have a major corporation like Scholastic that has a family and community engagement division. People are starting to sit up and say, whoa, this is starting to make sense here. So we're starting to see a lot of things happening in the field. A lot more foundations are saying, hey, we need to support this work. We have a national association now, NAFSCI, that all of you should join. There's a national conference coming up in Pittsburgh in June. We had 1,100 people at the one last year in Chicago. I hope they got a lot of rooms available in Pittsburgh, because I know a lot of people are talking about going to this conference. My institutes have been sold out, and now we actually are starting to see states put family engagement proficiency in their evaluations of not just teachers, but principals and superintendents. And these are some of the states that are starting to do that. Got a lot of publicity now around family engagement. So, you know, good things are happening, but it still seems to be difficult for us to get the ball rolling on family engagement. And so when Arnie Duncan asked me to come consult to the department, he said, Karen, can you help us answer the question, why is it that we're having so much trouble in this area? Why don't we see more take-up in this area? So I started to do some research, started interviewing some people. I had a hunch, and what I found out was that, you know, the main reason that we really don't do this work well is because we don't know how. Any teachers in the room? Anybody who's been a former teacher? Okay, so let me ask you a quick question. How many of you, when you were going through your teacher preparation programs, got a robust, full course on family engagement? No hands. I give this talk, and I work with teacher organizations around the country, and I've been in a room sometimes where there are 600, 700 teachers, and I will tell you that maybe I get 1 or 2 hands raised. That's the problem. We expect people to do things that we haven't trained them to do. Knowing how to relate to families is a skill. Take a look at this. Teachers are telling us that this is the #1 area that they feel least effective in. It's from a national MetLife survey. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's partially the reason why this has not been working for a lot of our districts. So what we decided to do with the Department of Ed was to provide a guide for our states and our districts and our schools to use to develop better family engagement programming. And so we came up with the idea of a framework, being a compass, a direction, but not a roadmap. And I say that because of this. A lot of times I'll go to a district and they'll say, Dr. Mapp, could you just tell us what you did in Boston? We're going to write it down, and then we're going to put it in place in Detroit. That doesn't work. Why? The context is different, right? Now, we know some of the basic foundational pillars of good, strong family engagement, but you have to shift them depending on your context. So that's why we call it a compass and not a roadmap. We use all different disciplines to put this framework together, not just family engagement research, but research from other areas. This is what the framework looked like in 2012, and because I believe in community engagement, we sent this out to people all over the country to get their feedback. Parent groups, community-based organizations, teachers, principals, researchers, policymakers, and they said, you know, this is a better way of showing the framework. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through it. It's a little tough to read. I'm trying to get my students to figure out a way to like move the words forward and go back and, you know, do all this really fancy stuff that I don't know how to do. But so what I'm going to do is just talk quickly through this. So first of all, what's the challenge? Just like a logic model, okay? So what's the challenge? Well, it's what I said. We haven't been trained in how to do this. Now here is the key point. A lot of times what happens in districts, which is fine, we start focusing on our families. So we have our parent institutes and our parent universities and our parent academies. That's great. But you also have to have the same kind of effort to build the capacity of your staff. So if you've got a parent university program, you also have to have a university type program for your staff on how to engage families. Because what's going to happen is you're going to end up empowering your parents, and they're going to get all excited about coming and working with your schools. I hear somebody laughing there, right? And they're going to walk in and say, hey, we're here to help. And the school's going to say, oh, no, you're not. Take a step back. Because we don't want you all pesky parents up in here telling us what to do. So if you don't build the capacity of your staff, and that's why this is called a dual capacity framework, then you end up with disequilibrium in the system. Okay? Got to do both. So this is really the most important part of the framework. This is the how-to part of the framework. And so what I want to do is to sort of unpack this a little bit, and then I'm actually going to move forward very quickly because I want to show you a video from a parent talking about her relationship with her school. So, not yet. We'll do it in a few minutes. So, how many of you have ever ridden a bike? Right? Maybe not well, but you rode it, right? Okay? So what I want to do here is I want to share with you what we know are the essential bike components to family engagement. So these are called the opportunity conditions. These are the conditions you have to create for strong family engagement. And there's two types, process conditions, and so those are the different steps that you have to put into an initiative to make it work. And then the organizational conditions are the supports that have to be in place. So let's talk about the process conditions first. So I'm going to use that metaphor of a bicycle. So on every single bike, what are the key components of those bikes that make it a bicycle? Brakes, handlebars, wheels, the tires, the seat, the frame, the pedals, the gears. Okay, those are the basic parts of every bike, right? Let me ask you a question. If I was riding in the Tour de France, not going to happen, would I use the same bike that I would use to sort of go biking in the Grand Canyon? No, right? What would be different? The bike in the Grand Canyons would be heavier because it's probably a mountain bike. The tires are going to be what? Thicker than on a racing bike. What else is going to be different? Well, we know the terrain, but what about the bike itself? The seat, right? Now, see, this is the kind of seat I want on my bike, right here. Right? If you put this on a bike, I would be golden. That's what I need. I don't like that little skinny thing. That's not for me. Okay? So you get the picture. Every single bike you should put together, but it might change a little bit depending on the terrain. Okay? So here's the first one. Every single family engagement program that you create should be linked to learning. Sounds simple, but let me tell you something. Let's talk about those open houses you have every year. Okay? So if I'm a parent and I'm going to, let's say, a high school open house, where do I usually go first, ladies and gentlemen? In the cafeteria or an auditorium like this. Who's talking to me? The principal. About what? Rules. What kind of rules? Attendance. What else? Discipline. You know, the discipline stuff, right? So, pretty much telling me about the rules and regulations of the school. Do I get to talk? Not yet. Okay, done hearing about that. Where am I going next? Classroom. Who's talking to me? About what? More rules. Classroom rules, right? Now, let me ask you a question. In most cases, do I as a parent leave that event, first of all, knowing what my children should know and be able to do by the end of the year, and if maybe the school shares that with me on a piece of paper, do I get to practice a new tool or learn a new skill to help my child meet those goals? If the answer is no, it's not linked to learning. So what I want you to think about when you go back to your organizations and look at what you've got planned for parents, is it really linked to learning? Do you share data with families about not just attendance, but what it is the children should know? See, this is how we link Barrington's presentation with Hetty's presentation. Because Hetty's saying, I want you to share data with families about why attendance is important. But then you also want to share with them, what should their kids be learning? What are some of the things we're trying to do? So now parents understand what your goals are. And they can link those two things together. Why it's so important to have that you know what in that seat every day. Okay? And you should be showing them some of those science projects and stuff they could do at home that help keep that science going and alive in the home. But a lot of times we just say, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, here's a list of books to read, and have a nice day. Could you make sure it's active reading? Okay, but what is that? So instead of showing families what active reading is in the classroom, we just send them off. That's what I mean by linked to learning. Second piece, we've already talked about this. It has to be relational. You have to build relationships with your families of trust and respect between home and school, because guess what? In many cities like Detroit, Chicago, Boston, there's been years of what I call generational disrespect between home and school, where families have felt disrespected for generations. And then all of a sudden we expect them to come bounding into our schools and be all happy and partner with us as we sit behind our desks. Not going to happen. We have to take the first step, ladies and gentlemen, to break down those barriers. So you have to have an intentional relationship building strategy to build those bonds between home and school. Some people are using home visits, even basic welcoming phone calls at the beginning of the year, because the last thing you want is for that first phone call home to be about bad news, because then that's what the relationship is going to be based on for the rest of the year. So you have to intentionally program a relationship building strategy into your events and initiatives with your families. You also have to have a different mindset. A lot of you know about Carol Dweck's work, mindset. Now, I have to be honest with you. This was where the federal government said to me, you know, Karen, you can't use the language you want to use here because it's too scary to people. Because what I really wanted to say in this area was you have to have a deficit, you have to get rid of that deficit mindset about families and have an asset-based mindset about families, where you see families as their first teachers and that you value their knowledge. Because, you know, our families know a lot about their children that we could use that knowledge in our classrooms. Boy, wouldn't it be great if Mrs. Williams had shared with me about how my kid does love snakes so that I could give them books about snakes. It helps us to be better teachers when our families share information with us. So to look at this versus, it's not a service. We shouldn't have a service mindset where, oh, you know, them poor folks. We got to do it for them. You know, because they can't do it for themselves because they just don't have it together. That's a deficit mindset. Versus, we are all going to develop our skills together. We're going to empower each other. So it's a different way of seeing the community. Also, collaborative. Again, where we are equal partners, and then interactive. I try sometimes, most of the time, I make sure that you and I do a little bit of a call and response, even in an auditorium like this. That's why I ask you about the bike. Because to get you engaged is how we learn. That's how adults learn. You know, I figure I got to do something because otherwise you all start checking your Facebook pages and all that other kind of stuff. I see y'all down there. Okay? So it's got to be interactive. And then finally, your system has to support the work. I've already talked about, you know, we see now from the research, the districts that really do this work well are districts that have people at the central office level, leadership level, reporting to the superintendent, being involved in the key leadership team who oversee the family engagement work. I kind of did this with you. If we had had more time, we would have done that. What do we see when all this stuff starts working well? Well, you saw it in the Grand Rapids example. People's capacity starts to grow. We call it the 4 C's, because a lot of times, you know, we talk about capacity building. Well, what the heck is that? Well, you know, capacity really means that our skills and our knowledge grow, so our capabilities, our connections, those networks we have with each other grow. Because, you know, for a lot of our families who are new to this country, they're isolated. If they don't speak English, they're isolated. So when we really start to meet and greet as adults, we start to share knowledge. It's what we call social capital. We also start to change the way we feel about each other. You know, I know a lot of staff who said to me, you know, I used to think our families didn't care about their kids' education. But now that I'm working with families, I see that all families care about their kids and want the best for them. My attitudes have changed. And I've had parents say, and you're going to see that in the clip, you know, it used to be that I saw the teachers as adversarial. I didn't see them loving my kids. But now I see that, and it makes me want to do everything I can to support that school. And then finally, our confidence in being able to work with one another increases. So when we get all this rolling, we end up with these effective partnerships. We end up with families who can participate in a number of different roles, either at home, at school, or in the community. And we have staff that really know how to welcome families, be culturally competent, et cetera. So what I'd like to do now is to show you a quick video of what happens at your schools when you are actually engaging families in this way. So if we can roll the videotape. Thanks, Ron. 'Cause, 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 'cause
immediately after the home visit, I was then invited to a back to school night they were having in Stanton. They gave me the little flyer. I was like, well, we're having a back to school night. It's from this time and this time. Bring the kids, like a meet and greet the teachers and everyone that was going to be there. But one thing I can say about, Stanton, period, is that it is constant communication, something I never had, something I completely enjoy. And it's not just negative communication, it's constant positive communication. I can be here at home, at work, anywhere, and one of my teachers would send me a text. Or I used to love it, Miss Lucas would send pictures. Take pictures of them doing classwork, and she said, see, look how my Tanae, well, I call her Bird. The school calls her Bird, which I love because it's like a community. They adopted her nickname. So she would send me a text like, look at Bird. She's having a wonderful day today, and she's doing good. But in saying that, that allowed me to hear, I put a trust in Miss Lucas for doing that. So no matter what she said, how she had to say it, what the information is, it made it easier for me to receive it from her, because she had built this communication, this trust that I never had. So I tell people now, friendship. You know what I'm saying? We're not friends to talk every single day, but she's a person that I will always hold in a high regard. She will always have my respect. I really respect Miss Lucas, and I value her so much, because not just her, but all the teachers, but like she was the first one to really extend herself to me. And I would get the text, and then one day Tanae had a bad day, and she called me, and I was expecting to hear something good. Oh, she got good on her test, so she did read, and she was like, well, we had a bit of an issue today. I'm like, for real? What happened? Well, Tanae did X, Y, and Z. And I didn't get defensive. I didn't get, well, what do you do? Or what I actually sat back and I listened and I received the information. And I processed the information. For me, that was something different, because at that point in time, I felt it like, why am I getting mad? Because normally when you call me on the phone and you telling me something about my child did this, I'm naturally on the defense, like, well, what did you do to make my child do this? Or who was messing with her in class, because my baby's a good baby. But in this time, it was different. And I don't know, it's because of the positive, feedback she gives me every day, the friendship we brought. It just made, when she was telling me what was going on, I took a breath, I stopped, and I listened. And then I was like, we actually got to a page where we worked together. I said, well, you know what, since she's having a bad day, can you put her on the phone? And I spoke with her on the phone, and I let her know that me and Miss Lucas are working together. We are a team, and if she asks you to do something, you need to treat it as if mommy is asking you to do something. So if she asks you to sit down, you need to sit down. And there was no more problems with Tanae.
That says it all, doesn't it? So you can see that Miss Kaya, because Miss Lucas reached out to her in friendship and partnership, had that relational piece, had been giving Miss Kaya information, linking it to learning, showing her what her daughter was doing, texting her, showing her pictures, having that positive relationship. Miss Kaya's whole feeling about the school and that teacher were so different than perhaps they had been before. I know this school very well. This is a school that went from being one of the worst schools in Washington, D.C., to one of the better schools in Washington, D.C., mainly because they had at first tried only 4 of those 5 essential supports. They had a strong leader, they had a good teaching team, good coaching, student-centered learning climate, but no family engagement strategy. And the first year, they did not improve at all. Second year, they partnered with Flamboyant on a family engagement initiative that was really focused on relationship building, really linked to learning, and you hear the results. So what I want to just do is to share with you sort of this final point. What I'd like you to do is to shift your mindset, ladies and gentlemen, if it hasn't been shifted already, about what this work means. We've got to really go from seeing family engagement as an add-on. It's not an add-on, because it's a core key ingredient to what we do. We now have to see it as an essential and fundamental part of our practice, of our teaching practice. of our instructional practice. Because without it, we really aren't going to make the gains that we'd like to see. So these are some of the upcoming events. I mentioned to you the family engagement conference by IEL, and Scholastic generously supports that as well. I also want to mention to you that what sometimes happens to me when I do these talks is that everybody calls me to come do the talk for their district or their school. They want me to do workshops. But what I've done now, since there's only one of me, I'd love to be able to sort of clone me out, but I can't do that. We've developed a teaching training team on family engagement with Scholastic. So if you're interested in having workshops for school teams, you should definitely talk to Michelle about that, because we developed this last year so that we have this whole sort of SWAT team of trainers who are all people who've been doing this work for years, who can actually come and train your school teams on this whole piece around the dual capacity framework. And then I also wanted to put this up there because a lot of times parents want, you all want to know the link to that video. So it's the second one down. There's a great summary of the dual capacity framework if you want more information on that. Flamboyant, Scholastic has done a video series on it, and then there's some other resources there for you as well. And my students, one of my former students is here. David Donaldson is in the back. David, raise your hand. He's what keeps me going in this work when I see people who have come to Harvard out there doing the great work in our districts. So thanks, David, for coming. But my students push me to do this, right? And David knows me. He knows how I struggle with technology when he was in my class. But my Twitter handle. My students said, Professor Mapp, you got to get on Twitter, you know? So I was like, now they're trying to get me to be on Instagram. I cannot go that far. This is it. This is it. So this is my Twitter handle. Please follow me because I try to put anything I see around family engagement, I try to tweet it out. So, 45 minutes. I hope this was worth your time. Thank you very much, and go have your lunch.